ladies and gentlemen, the basic difference between the two sides of the House, and particularly our team as opposed to the others, is the fact that whereas both of these sides of the House present what is at best a temporary solution, we insist upon the importance of a lasting long-term solution to resolve the underlying problems that currently occur in Myanmar right now. Right? Now, I'll move on to my two main questions a little later, but I'll first give you one statement coming across from the last leader of the House. He finally, from opposition, talked about the role of government, right? And that the role of the government is to protect the people and their rights. I'm paraphrasing here. I will use this statement to show exactly why our side of the House has established the role of the government and why it has ensured that the role of the government is properly carried out under the model of the people. Right? The two questions that come across here. The first question is the question of governmental responsibility, as I just said. What exactly is the government supposed to do? What is its mandate here? What is it supposed to take care of in terms of the people of Myanmar and those it proposes to eject or not eject? Right? Basically, we are arguing here, particularly as Anand said, that the government needs to account for the interests of the people as a whole. Right? So in Myanmar, the government must look towards the interests of the people as a whole and determine whether or not, if they're creating a new state in the first place, whether that new state will be viable in the first place. Right? That's exactly what Anand told you. So we propose that a duty exists for the government to take into account these considerations. If we are creating a new state, will that new state be able to take care of itself and support itself? Because the people you are ejecting from your country and making a new country out of are your own people, right? So the problem we have is the abdication of all responsibility towards this entire section of the population and simply stating they are people who cause problems for us, let's throw them out and let them take care of themselves. That's the issue, right? Now, in essence, we have to discuss here the purpose of autonomy and what autonomy is supposed to serve. As Anand hinted at in his last speech, we talked about the fact that the purpose of autonomy is to ensure that the new units you create are viable, both on a social level and economic level. So are they able to support themselves? That's the main purpose of determining whether autonomy should or should not be granted, right? Now, basically, the opening op was ridiculous in the analysis, and they said, look, they have land, so they have resources. Ladies and gentlemen, we are looking at a group of people who, the section of Myanmar particularly, who has currently right now no voice in upper leadership in Myanmar, no organized leadership to speak of whatsoever. They are poor and historically subjugated. You expect them to now go ahead and create and run a new state. You assume they have enough economic viability, enough industrial strength, enough resources to do it, right? They assume that they'll get all the best land they need from Myanmar and be able to run their own country. We refute that and we state if you give them a new country, whatever quality of life they have right now will get even worse because they don't have the instrumentation they need to be able to run that country in the first place. A second element of responsibility is responsibility and governmental choice, right? They themselves, again, very glibly stated, look, if they want to stay in that country, they have every right to do so, otherwise they can leave. And again, let me use the example they used of India and Pakistan. What happened in the partition of India and West Pakistan, East Pakistan? What occurred, the problem that occurred there is, in many cases, the choice was made for the people in the first place. So when the countries were divided, many Hindus in India felt that the Muslims no longer belonged there because they now had their own country, which is why violence exploded in India after the partition and many Muslims were forced out of the country into Pakistan or East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, right? The question of them stating, look, you can exercise your choice and you can choose to remain there if you want to, simply isn't true because the choice is illusory. It doesn't exist. Millions of Muslims were thrown out of India against their will, primarily because the Hindus in India no longer considered them to be a viable and legitimate part of the country anymore. And that is the problem. If reducing violence is indeed their objective, then a proposal that leads to an explosion of violence and that will ensure that people are forced out of a country they actually want to belong to is inherently a problematic one. And the final responsibility, sub-question I'm dealing with here, is the question of responsibility and precedent, right? We basically stated, as Anand said, that this sets a precedent on an international level of legitimizing violence as a potential viable option to secure your political ends, whether that be a new state or whatever it is you seek to, right? So let's say the Kashmir militants right now, if they wish to seek and they see precedent coming out of Myanmar that you can simply be violent as you choose to be and get a new state out of it, it will only lead to an escalation of violence. Because clearly in international law now, there's been a conduit established between your enacting violence and the state giving in. And that is the problem that we have with this, right? The issue that you set a clear precedent to allow individuals to enact violence to secure these ends. And the nation is willing to compromise on its own sovereignty to satisfy those ends, even though it hasn't accounted for whether it's viable or not. Even though it hasn't accounted for whether the choice is actually illusory or real for those people, is the problem. Go ahead.
We have tried multiple times to solve the situation, it has not been solved. So which is better? Persecution with no resources or continued persecution with some probable or no resources?
What's better right now is improvement of the situation in the country right now with availability of some resources, as against their model in which a new country is created with no resources, no responsibility and no responsibility and no history of governance whatsoever, no record in which they can try to achieve this governance in the first place, absolutely in no ability whatsoever for them to run their own affairs. That is the issue. When you create a completely unstable, unviable new nation with the governance, the top brass of that country having no experience whatsoever in running the country, whatever state of affairs you have with those people right now will only get worse, and that's the problem we pointed out. Second question, the question of national integrity, right? We talked about essentially the idea, particularly from Anil, that the underlying causes of cultural enmity and violence have simply not been addressed here. All we've done is said, you know what, we abdicate our responsibility, we will let it go, we'll try to see what happens next time, right? We've talked about why there's an inherent need to preserve the nation's integrity in itself, right? Particularly given the analysis they gave us of Myanmar being a developing nation. So the analysis we give you now is the importance of building a stable social cultural base in which to ground that development, right? So if your response to any cultural or intercultural or intergroup violence or any relation whatsoever is to simply throw one group out, it could be one group today and another group tomorrow, all you have ultimately is a failure to address the underlying causes for why such violence and why such strife arose in the first place, right? If you do not attempt a certain degree of integration between these big different groups, you cannot create a society stable enough to be able to support development in the medium and long term, right? So therefore the greater need exists to bridge the gaps that exist between these groups in the first place and not just eject groups as we feel necessary. Because if we do not address the reasons for why there are divisions between groups within Myanmar society, you simply will not be able to create a social base stable enough to achieve that development in the first place. And that's the issue, right? They talked extensively about the importance of religion and religion defining cultural identity and personal identity. Anil told you clearly that we cannot allow religious concerns to compromise national concerns of development and national concerns of integrity, right? We must attempt reconciliation between these groups, because otherwise the underlying causes we've talked about will simply remain completely unaddressed, right? So in essence, if you do not take into account the reasons for why this violence exists or why this strife exists, and you simply eject one group and tomorrow it could be another group, you have not set down a stable basis for the economic development of Myanmar, because you haven't seen why people fight in the first place and try to reconcile the differences between them. And for all of these reasons, we are very proud to propose.
Okay, thank you so much, government, for recognizing the government's role exactly. Your role is to take responsibility to civils and to account the interests as a whole, and you have numerous duties. Yes, right. But Madam Speaker, I can't hide my disappointment to the government side. What kind of irresponsible and shameful government says violence will happen anyways, and integration of two religions? It's such a shame. And there are two. We found two clashes from. First of all, by granting the autonomy to regions based upon religion lines. First of all, we can express the respect for all, including the atheists. Secondly, we can decrease the further detrimental results and conflicts. During this debate, there were a lot of arguments regarding the Myanmar situation. Thank you. Myanmar, Kashmir, and all the Middle East, Palestinian, Israelis, those kind of very controversial areas. However, broaden your perspective. Yes, we acknowledge that the nice intention of the government side to give to both parties incentives. However, that action is completely ignoring the culture, identity, and tradition of people living in that region. Religion is not just about the belief. It is their culture, it's their tradition, it's their lifestyle, and everything. So not allowing the state autonomy is ignoring their their centuries and decades of traditions and everything. So that is not a right action of the government to show the respect for all the people as a whole. And there are thousands and billions of numerous tribes and minorities who has been living in the same region for centuries and decades just because of their based on their religion, especially in China, Mongolia, Nepal, and even in Indonesia. And not only about the Asia, their state of Utah in USA, where the Mormon religion is solely living in the state, and they are having very peaceful lives. And move. No, thank you. And as for to further explain about the respect for people, atheists who doesn't have any religion at all might feel if their residence is where all the other religions are combined in, they might feel the privacy intervention. For example, the Muslim people have their exact time when they show their respect and bow to their God, and those who do not believe in Islam or atheists will probably find that kind of action very violent to their private lives and their lifestyle. So granting the religion line will show a respect to diversity types of people. And second clash, move on to our second clash about the decrease of further detrimental results in conflicts. Yes, the opening bench of the opposition side have mentioned about that granting these kind of regions will make it united eventually, and that can only achieve under the tolerance. Yes, that is right. And the reason why there are so many conflicts going on in the Myanmar and Kashmir and Palestinians is their struggle, is their pure struggle for their belongingness and their tradition and their beliefs. So by granting this kind of religion lines, it will decrease the further detrimental results in conflicts. And there's this nature of religion which our member of opposition have mentioned, that religion itself has this nature that keeps on going conflicts and exclusive to each other. So by setting up this, okay.
So according to you, any group of people who are different from any other group of people in any way should be given autonomy because their cultures and beliefs clash.
Yes, this debate is about the world. It's not just only about the Kashmir and those kind of controversial areas. I know that we all live in Asia, but we have to broaden our perspectives. That's what we need to do. No, thank you. For those reasons, I have no, thank you. I have given. I'm very proud to oppose this motion. Thank you.